I am now joined in the studio by two amazing thought leaders who have been longtime friends of Corinium to chat all about the journey to the data-driven enterprise. Welcome to both Tiffany and Hamdan. Hi guys, how's it going?
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to have you here.
Happy to be here.
Thank you.
So I would love to start things off by giving the audience an opportunity to just learn a little bit more about the two of you. So Tiffany, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So officially, my PhD is in social personality psychology, and it's a really long title called the Interdisciplinary Concentration in Advanced Quantitative Methods. But really what that translates into is applied psychology and statistics. So the application of statistics to really understand and learn about how businesses make decisions, how we do decision making, and to really drill down into that. Now, in terms of broader background, I've also had a lot of experience across a number of different industries. So I've done work for like Toys R Us, Mercedes-Benz, Motorola, single engine golf, jet planes, the Golf Association. And currently in my role, I am focused on asset management, obviously, but within financial services, I've also done a lot of work in consumer banking, I was at a hedge fund, institutional sales and trading, global markets, et cetera. So I have a very broad and unique perspective on data, the application of data, how we should be using and thinking about analytics, and then ultimately using and bringing that information together to drive insights. And on my current team, I am really focused on how we are building data infrastructure, driving data science and machine learning techniques through the broader organization. And I'm constantly looking for rock stars to help me do that. And hence we have Hamdan, who is here and will join me.
That is a really impressive and really interesting background. And I'm excited to dig into more of your knowledge as we talk through our conversation today. So Hamdan, tell me about yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Tiffany. That was very kind. I've always been interested in math. I wanted to do something quantitative that was related to the real world. And I chanced upon applied statistics while I was in college. I took 2 graduate courses. I really loved that it was a way to connect math to the real world. Data essentially has become a common language across almost every single field, right? And you can use data to understand societies. You can use it to understand individual people's decision making. You can use it to understand economies. You can use it to understand business. And, I've had a pretty rewarding career using data across industries. The tech sector. I've worked on many political campaigns. I've worked in startups. I've worked in academic settings. I started out working in a neuroscience lab. Across all of these settings, the situation was we have a lot of data. We don't know what to do with it. Can you help us find something meaningful here? And what that ends up being differs, right? It can be a product. It can be a tool. It can be an analysis. It can be some insights that help us better understand how people make decisions or how revenues are generated in a large corporation. But I think throughout this process, for me, it's always like a detective story, right? It's like you're starting out with a big mess, thousands or trillions of rows of data, messy Excel files, databases, and you have to find some meaning in it, right? You have to understand what does the end user care about. How do we take this messy data and translate it into something that adds value to a business, to an academic setting, to an institution? And I think that journey has been very rewarding. It's always different every time, but throughout it, there are common threads. I think the process is very similar, and it's really enjoyable because the field of data science has been changing so rapidly, but also the fields in which data science has penetrated is expanding, so rapidly, right? And our ability to find insights, the need for that is growing tremendously. And I think the amount of data has grown exponentially. Our ability to find insights has maybe grown linearly. So that gap is increasing, which is wonderful because it means there will always be a need for data scientists, but not just data scientists in a technical sense, but people who can bridge across data, society, business, multiple stakeholders, multiple domains, bring that interdisciplinary hat to bear, to drive value. And it's been, a really rewarding journey.
It sounds like it. And what an incredibly just impressive background both of you have. And what an important role you play as well. That's a very powerful position to be in. So how long have the two of you worked together?
So Hamdan and I started working together just over about a year and 3 months ago. He joined our team right before COVID hit.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were just talking about it. This is like our third time actually seeing each other in person.
But we're on Zoom calls all day, every day.
All day, every day. So it's like, it just occurred to me as we were sitting here, because we're constantly on Zoom, and I didn't remember that I hadn't actually seen him in person.
Oh my gosh. It's just been such a crazy year. Well, that's wonderful. I'm glad to be a part of your third reunion that you've had in the past year and a half.
Thank you.
So, I mean, I would love to just learn a little bit more about the main challenges that you have encountered in using data science and analytics to drive business value, and how have you overcome them? So, Tiffany, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, sure. I would say one significant challenge is, especially in the industry and financial services, we have over-indexed in terms of everybody wants to do AI, right? And the reality is a lot of financial services firms are really nascent or maybe approaching maturity, but not quite mature in their data and analytics journey, and definitely not advanced. So if you think about data as the flip side of a coin, on the one side, you have sort of investments data, right? So that's data that's being used to inform portfolio construction, asset allocation, and decisions about how we are making investment decisions. And then on the other flip side of the coin, you have client data, which is data all about our clients. Who are they? Where are they? How do we meet them most effectively? How do we meet them where they are? How do we provide services, products, and tools that are meaningful for them at the current stage of development where they are? And what we have discovered is that really the investments data works, right? For the most part. The client data, though, is lacking because we have a very white glove, high touch business in financial services, especially in asset management and in any of the B2B spaces. And as a result, all of that knowledge lives with sort of the relationship manager and their business, and it doesn't live in data sets and databases that can be used across the firm. So as a result, that industry has grown into a little bit of a laggard as it relates to how it's moving forward in data and analytics. So we are really in a very aggressive, proactive way, trying to move the needle, in the organization by really helping them understand where data lives. But not only that, where are the pockets of activity and analytics that we can bring together to really leverage all of the work that's happening across the firm in meaningful ways, right? So a lot of that is how do we accelerate? How do we elevate? How do we move the envelope really, really quickly so that we end up in a place where we are more advanced, and we're kind of leapfrogging as opposed to just taking linear steps towards a goal.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Hamdan, any thoughts to add here? Challenges and how you've overcome them?
Yeah, no, I think there's tremendous opportunity ahead of us, because I think we really only scratched the surface of how can we get the most value out of data from a client perspective. As Tiffany mentioned, investments data has been a field for decades, right? There's been pioneering quantitative finance work done around how portfolios get constructed, how risk gets modeled, how revenues get forecast. On the client side, it's a bit of a wild, wild west, right? Because we have so much data. A lot of it is unstructured. We have notes from meetings that clients are having. We have, materials that clients are being sent. We have email correspondence. All of this is right now being stored in databases, and the amount of analytical prowess that has been brought to bear is very limited compared to the potential of what can be done. So I think there's a lot of opportunity ahead of us to really get some significant value out of this, and find the key insights that will drive our businesses and our teams forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How do you take non-technical stakeholders along the journey and really make sure that they understand the importance of data science and analytics? Hamdan, maybe let's start with you for this one.
Sure. Yeah. So I think in tech, they often talk a lot about having empathy for the user. And I think often people think this is only limited to designing products and building apps, and the app should have empathy and Spotify should be user friendly. But I think it really applies to a lot more than that. I think for me, it's a part of our ethos as data scientists is that we have to start from a position of deep empathy for the end user. We have to understand their mindset. We have to understand what they care about, what their priorities are, what is something that will move the needle for them in terms of what they're trying to get out of their role, what their objectives are. And then that's the starting point, right? And then we back into that from what is the data and what are the tools we have at our disposal and what are the technologies. And then it's a matter of finding that meeting point. But it really starts from that position of deep empathy. It starts from taking a gradual approach, a staging approach almost, understanding what are their limitations in terms of their ability to understand complicated technical concepts. Not everyone, you can't just jump in and tell them this is what the k-means clustering says if they have no idea what any of those three words mean. Sometimes people don't even know the difference between a mean and a median. It happens to all of us. So I think a lot of it is, starting with the very basics, explaining it very simply, and then, definitely being able to go very technical when necessary, but having that emotional intelligence to know when that is appropriate, making sure you've taken them along on that journey, that they're with you every step of the way, so that then when you do get technical, that you make sure they understand and it has the impact and it lands the way it should.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that you talk about empathy and even being empathetic in the conversations that you're having, those stakeholders that need to feel like they are understood, but are also understanding what you're trying to explain to them and the value you're trying to show to them. Yeah. That's great. That's a great approach. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say for our business, it's really important that we be a fiduciary to our clients. And in financial services, that really translates into doing what's in our client's best interest. And the interesting thing about the work that we do is that we're taking that lens, but through data. How are we doing what's in our client's best interest through data? Through the way that we're using data and information, to the way that we are empathetic to our clients' needs, to our relationship manager needs, to the way that we deliver and share information. All of that is really about still being fiduciary to our client.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, Tiffany. So how do you build a data-driven culture to ensure that decisions are actually being driven by data and not by feelings? So maybe stepping away from emotional intelligence and empathy, and how do you do that?
So for me, I think I would probably say, if I were to think about it, there are 4 or 5 key pieces that are important when you're trying to build a data-driven culture. The first is maturity, meaning people really working with business partners and teams to help them understand where are they on this maturity curve? Are they nascent? Meaning, do they even have data brought together and collected so that they can start to think about it? Forget about are they doing natural language processing, or to Hamdan's point, do they understand principal components analysis? That's higher level, more, detailed data analysis. But where are they on the maturity curve? Once you determine where they are on the maturity curve, then it's a matter of how do we educate them, which is something Hamdan mentioned. How are we educating people around what it means, what this data means, how they should be looking at it and thinking about it and thinking through it, and what pieces of it do they need to tell the story they're trying to tell, which also leads into literacy, really helping people to become data literate. It's more than just understanding, because you want people to get comfortable enough so that they can actually take the learnings and go out and tell the world, right? So that you are basically training people to be data ambassadors for the work that they're doing. And that's a very important part of it. And then ultimately, another really important point is talent. How are you bringing talent in? And I feel like we have a tendency, we're looking for data scientists and we want people who can do data science. And for me, I want data gurus. And that means I want people who can think critically and innovatively through data, right? They may not be able to code in Python, because you know what? Sometimes the answer can be done with a pivot table in Excel. And I just want people to acknowledge and admit that. And that's where we are. If that's where you are in the journey, let's start there. But let's really start to train, I think, every role in a firm, by the way, from operations to marketing to legal. Everyone should be thinking through a data-driven lens and trying to figure out what are the data elements that are important to me and how do I use those to do my job more effectively.
Yeah, no, I agree. Everything Tiffany said is right on point. I think often it starts with something as simple as pushing people to quantify and put things in context. So, for example, if someone comes to us and says, "Oh, we're seeing a lot of interest from clients in carbon credits," just like nudging them, a lot of interest. What does that mean? Right? Can you quantify that? And it's not only, oh, we saw 3.7 million people talk about carbon credits. It's about the context, right? It's about, we saw 3.7 million, I'm just making it up, right? We saw 3.7 million people talk about carbon credits, and this is how it compares to what we saw last year. And meanwhile, 8 million people were talking about, Taylor Swift and Kanye West. It's like, it's just putting that in context and always trying to quantify, but also merging it with the so what, because I think that's really important. And often you have people who do either one of those by themselves. It's a matter of mixing the quantitative with the implications. And I think that gets to these type of data science gurus that Tiffany has been, cultivating throughout her career, and I think is really, has been having a lot of impact.
Mm-hmm. And Tiffany, to go back to a point that you made, I think I agree. I think it's actually it would be very valuable for every single group, every sector of a company to be able to think with that critical data-driven lens, which really isn't something that you see happening that often. You kind of leave it to the people who are experts and they've had formal training, and then the conversation really isn't continued in, sure, in some marketing context, but in legal and even sales, you're not necessarily having those same conversations, not at every level.
Right.
So I think that's a really interesting point, and I do see the value in that. Absolutely. Yeah. So you've spoken about using a crawl, walk, run approach in driving data science maturity in large, complex organizations. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, Hamdan?
Sure. Yeah. So I think this ties very closely with what Tiffany was talking about, the maturity curve, right? Understanding how mature are our stakeholders in their ability to think quantitatively, in their ability to use data to think through their business problems. And I think, with this crawl, walk, run approach concept, the idea is that organizations and individuals and teams exist at all levels of the spectrum. And we can't just come in and say, I'm a data scientist, how can I help you? Because the vast majority of our audience might have no idea what that means. They might not know what to do with that. So we need to start with the very basics, right? The very basics are, does this organization understand what data is? Do they know that data is all around us, right? Data doesn't have to be a database or a giant Excel file. Any interaction we have, any touch points we have throughout our day, it's a piece of information. Data is just information. It's all around us, right? So helping people understand that data is generated and produced and consumed all around us as part of our daily lives, as part of the functioning of our organizations. So that, I think, is the starting point. And then a slightly more mature level is, okay, now we have a lot of data. What do we do with it? And I think that also is a very important level for data scientists to learn how to have impact at. And, we need to be very organized, very disciplined, very strategic, classify, categorize. What is the information we have? Where is it housed? What are the limitations? What are the implications? What are the future opportunities? And then I think only once these foundational levels are built, do we get to more interesting things, such as now we have all this information. We know what to do with it. We know what the business cares about. Now we turn to, what are the technologies we apply? How do we use natural language processing or machine learning or artificial intelligence? But that is often the last step. If we haven't built that foundation, then someone will come in and build a model that no one understands, no one's going to use. It's going to be fun for the person who built it, but it's not going to add a lot of value for anyone else. That's why we think it's so important to take that gradual approach.
And that happens a lot, by the way. People are often building models to answer questions that no one really knows how to interpret or understand. And so the goal is really, how do you get away from that? How do you move away? How do you move to a scenario where, when Hamdan talks about crawl, walk, run, like sometimes we're crawling and running at the same time, right? We're building the plane and flying the plane simultaneously. And I think it's really important for people who are building data organizations to understand that that is not necessarily a linear process, because there are so many functions, businesses, products, right, within a given organization, and they could all be at different levels of maturity. And as they are, we have to collaborate with them where they are in their data journey to really understand how to move them to that next level, whatever that next level is. But the whole firm may not move concurrently. Mm-hmm. And that's really important to understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think it's also validating to some companies that are seeing that happen, and they're like, are we doing this at the right pace? And right. It's probably not a one-size-fits-all approach. You just have to kind of see what works with the crawl and the run and learn from each step along the way. Tiffany, what qualities are most important to you when hiring data scientists, experts like Hamdan?
Yeah.
And other types of data specialists in your organization, what's important
Yes.
to you?
So I am constantly looking for people who can think critically through data, right? I want people who understand how to look at a data set and really tease out the insights. I am tool agnostic. I mean, if you can code in Python and you know R and you can use SPSS and Statistica and SAS, that's all great. But can you ask yourself, what are the key questions that I need to pull out of that data, and then figure out how to do it using whatever tool you have at your disposal, and recognizing that you're asking a question that you can't do with the tools you have on hand. So how do I partner with, other people on the team to sort of get the question answered? But the key to me, which I think sometimes when people go to boot camps, they just become data scientists, but they miss this element, which is the critical thinking through data. Like, how do you critique and redesign? It's such an important skill set that I think we don't lean into enough in the data space. So really being able to capture what people need to do in the data, how they can answer those questions in a very innovative or creative way, or just get to a number of different answers, right? Like optionality, like I see this happening in the data and here are the different ways that I want to approach it and think about it and answer it. That is a critical skill. So I'm always looking for that. And if you have domain expertise, meaning with a particular tool, great. If you have business knowledge, great. If you know the functional area that you're working in, great. Because all of those things I think you will learn. You can learn to do those things differently. I think it's harder to teach someone how to be a strategic data critical thinker than it is to teach them how to run a program in Python, quite frankly. So I'm really always looking for and trying to tease out who are the people who are asking the hard questions, thinking strategically through the information, and really trying to get to the crux of what the challenges are within the data.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here for a second. Can you give us an example of an interview question you might ask someone to see if they are a sophisticated critical thinker?
Yes, I often ask people to give me an example of a problem that they have encountered, like a serious, complex problem that they've encountered, and how did they go about answering it? And the key is, are they answering it based on, oh, I ran this code and did this analysis? Or are they answering it more strategically based on, oh, I was thinking about it and realized that this was a challenge and I didn't really know necessarily how to execute to get to the answer, but I was able to think through the problem, like the logic. So I'm always looking for, is the answer logical, or do they just go straight to tool? Like, oh, I ran this analysis, or I did, but I'm looking for like how they walk me through the problem. Like, is it a problem solving effort that they went through and then decided, oh, I'm going to use this tool or I'm going to run this analysis to try to answer it. But how did they get there? Mm-hmm. So that journey, so people often get tripped up and they immediately go into, because we're data scientists, like, oh, I ran this really cool thing. And I'm like, no, it's not the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. And really, it sounds like it's a matter of choosing a strategic approach versus a tactical approach.
Because you always have to go strategic first.
Yeah.
Like, in order to get to a really solid solution to a complex data problem, you have to have thought about it from a number of different angles. Mm-hmm. Then you figure out, okay, this is the way that I need to do it to execute the answer, but I understand now what I'm trying to get to.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's fascinating. And anybody in the audience who is looking for a job and interviewing, you should take this advice and practice responding to this question. That's great. Thanks, Tiffany, for sharing that. So, Hamdan, how do you develop business literacy amongst data scientists in such a fast-paced, financially driven industry?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think this is, it's very important. I think it kind of relates to the question you just asked, Tiffany, because I think a lot of it is driven by this deep sense of curiosity. I think for me, data science is it's a domain that rewards curiosity, that actually requires curiosity, right? Because we're going into these settings where there are these complex business problems that, people haven't even necessarily, articulated what is the actual problem, right? Like, people might have different articulations of the problem. And the hardest part in data science is translating a problem from English to what is the code necessary to give you the answer. Everything is in that journey. And this journey is it's a lifelong journey, right? Because you have to understand what is the thing they care about versus what are the tools and technologies at our disposal and what is the data at our disposal necessary to answer this question. And I think throughout this process, I think one has to be driven by a deep sense of curiosity, a realization that what might look like numbers in a spreadsheet to you, someone else deeply cares about it. This is their business. This is something they've been working on for 20 years. Each number in that spreadsheet, it could be a person, it could be institutions, it could be people's life savings, it could be the health and the financial well-being of nations, right? There's a lot of value. It's not just numbers in a spreadsheet. They're never just numbers in a spreadsheet, right? And I think having worked in many industries, you realize that anything can be boiled down to numbers in a spreadsheet, right? Like when I get blood tests, those numbers end up as numbers in a spreadsheet, but it tracks my life. My watch is measuring my heartbeat. You could be like, oh, those are just numbers in a spreadsheet. No, but it has to do with how healthy I am and how fast my heart is beating, right? So it's about translating between these aren't just numbers in a spreadsheet. These aren't just databases. The information here is something that is relevant and important to real people, millions, billions of real people. It's important to businesses. And the question is, how do you extract value from these numbers in a database, from these spreadsheets, in a way that can solve real people's problems, business problems, human problems, social problems? I think that really is the promise of data science. And I think doing that, by definition, if you're doing all of that, then you will develop a deep empathy and a familiarity with the businesses you're working with, right? Often you're not going into it trying to become an expert in one very narrow area of finance or marketing or, genomics, but that happens along the way by default. If you're engaged with your stakeholders, if you're constantly deploying your critical thinking and your data skills to drive value in that industry, by definition, by the end of it, you should know that industry maybe deeper than the domain experts in that field do, because you're the one who knows the data, right? If someone has a conceptual understanding of a field and you're going deep in trillions of records of data, by the end of it, you should have acquired that understanding. But it requires pairing the data with the human element, right? Taking that human along with us on that journey, understanding the bigger picture, understanding what they care about, and through the end of it, driving value for our partners and stakeholders.
And one of the most important things you can learn as a data scientist, which Hamdan alluded to, is you can't just take a problem because someone presents it to you and run off and solve it. Sometimes people are asking for things that they don't need or they don't know that they need. So a key role for a data scientist is really to help the person articulate what the real need is. And then how do we find and apply data to that need, right? So sometimes people are asking us for things and we're like, I think the traditional path would be, our partner in this area asked us to go build this tool or this, way of thinking about or analyzing their information to get at some goal. And then you realize that's not really the goal. That's just a step to get to the ultimate goal. And how do you get people to think critically themselves? Not just this is also about training people to be more, thoughtful about their own data, right? So how do you get people to re-articulate or articulate in a different way what they are really asking you to do? And that exercise often takes time, but it's also part of the education of getting both the people who are asking for the help to understand and articulate what it is that they need in a way that is most helpful to them, but also to get the data scientists to be more of a critical thinker around the problems that are inherent in the business, which they will start to learn, to Hamdan's point, because we have access to all the data. We probably end up knowing more than people who are actually in the day-to-day in their sort of narrowly focused roles.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, I feel like I need a data scientist just in my life, in my my everyday life, to look at what I'm doing and the patterns and draw conclusions. It's just so interesting. It's so interesting. Do you find that it is difficult or challenging to ask people or help them or educate them on becoming more of a critical thinker? Do you feel like it comes more naturally to certain personality types or people, or is it a skill that people can truly sharpen and work on?
I think that there are types that it comes naturally to, but I don't think it's a personality type. I think it's a skill type. Like if you are used to learning, if you think about the different ways that people learn in various learning styles, I think if you're used to learning a certain way, and especially if you're used to sort of dissecting problems to get to end results or to figure out the nuances and the incremental steps, then you end up in a place where you are more likely to be thinking critically when it comes to a data challenge, versus some people are so high level and strategic that it is virtually impossible to get them down to the level of detail and minutia that it requires to think critically through a data problem, right? They just can't do it. And not only that, they're not interested in doing it. They're like, what? So I think that there are types based on skill sets, and there are people who are more prone to be able to do it than others, but it's definitely something you can learn. If you are a strategic thinker and you feel like that level of sort of nuance and detail is important to how you do your strategy or build your strategy, you can learn to think more critically around the data and the inputs that you're using to sort of develop your strategic perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's, encouraging is that we're seeing people of all fields entering data science, right? And I think that is where there's tremendous value, where it's not just something where you sit at a computer all day and you copy paste some tutorial and you tweak some code. That's not data science, right? Data science is, I think, why I enjoy data science is probably my background as a storyteller, as a journalist, something I've done in a previous life, right? Where I think that gives me, it makes me curious. It makes me very questioning. And I'm always thinking about how do I tell the story? And I think that skill set is critical for a data scientist, because otherwise you just get lost in the data. You spend years going through trillions of rows of data and you have very little to show for it. Whereas if I'm always thinking, next Monday I have to meet Tiffany, I'm going to tell her a story that she's going to be like, wow, I never knew that. So then that's going to motivate me as I'm going through the data in terms of how I approach it, in terms of the questions I ask, in terms of the approach I take, because at the end of it, I'm trying to find a story. I'm trying to find that aha moment, for our stakeholders, for senior leaders, for people who don't have the technical skills to go through trillions of rows of data, right? So if I'm able to do that, then I should be able to add a lot of value, and that I should be able to tell a story that solves their problem. I should be able to find those key insights. And I think that's a vital skill set for data scientists. I think there's, the field has almost over-indexed towards, core technical skills and lost this emphasis on this broader, human insight, this broader business acumen, just this deep sense of curiosity. And I think it's really essential. And I think this is what makes data science so rewarding, because no 2 days are the same. It's not cookie cutter. It's not like there's a lot of data and you press this button and you get business value and you get, everyone loves you. There's no recipe. We're discovering that recipe every day as we go along.
And people may see that as an oxymoron, actually. So Hamdan's making an extremely important point, like storytelling, right? Versus data science, because I think people see data scientists as people who are in the corner working on a computer, crunching out some numbers, long sheets of paper, handing them over. And the reality is that if you cannot tell a story, you can't work for me, because it is so important that you be able to take all of that work that you are doing, analytically, and translate that into something that is understandable, easy to digest as an end user, and also accessible, meaning like people can come sort of rally around this story, which is fueled by and driven by an analysis, right? But in a way that they can own it themselves and really start to sort of push the envelope forward in terms of how we make change. So storytelling, which I think people see as, it's a soft skill. Anybody can tell a story. Can anybody tell a story?
No. No.
Anybody can't. It's a really concrete skill. And it is so important, especially for data types, data infrastructure people, data scientists. It's important that they be able to close that gap by being able to apply a storytelling methodology to the work that they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that you took us a little bit deeper there, because Hamdan, when you said the word storytelling, I was like, "Ooh, he's good!" Like you took it from one level to a completely different level, and it just shows your leadership. It also shows that you're strategic. It's not about just the tactics. It's not about just the numbers, but telling a story eloquently and in a way that's impactful and effective it's a different level of communication. So we are just about at time. We are going to do one rapid fire final question. What is one key takeaway for people who are leading or building data organizations? And Hamdan, let's start with you.
I think it's very important to inspire people around the vision and the ability of data science to truly revolutionize organizations and teams and entire businesses, where often we have mountains of data that has never been explored. We're the first ones on the shore, and we have all of these incredible skills that we've honed through graduate school and through all of these jobs. We know all of these technologies. It's just like, let's just get to work, right? What are we waiting for? There's so much potential. There's so much ability. If no one has looked at this data, chances are there are treasures buried in this data, and we just have to get to work. We have to inspire our teams around that mission, around how rewarding that mission is, and how much impact really is just around the corner. And I think that is that inspiring and setting that vision is super important.
Absolutely. Tiffany?
Yeah, I would say perseverance and tenacity are extremely important. When you're if you work out, you're doing the workout, you're 45 minutes into the workout, it's almost over, you're drenching, you're tired, you can barely breathe. And the instructor says, 1 minute straight of mountain climbers, go, right? And you're like, oh my God, am I going to be able to get through this? Can I get through this? That's what it takes. Right? Mm-hmm. Because we are in a place where I would say 90% of the industry, across industries, 90% of firms are really not advanced or mature in their data journey. So what that translates into is that people are going to have to be doing change management exercises, right? You're going to have to, this is transformation we're talking about, innovation, like really changing the fabric of an organization. And that wears you down. And you don't want to stop, though. You want to keep going. You want to keep going. And people can wear you down. You're like, oh my God, how many times? Okay, let me do this again. Right? So you really want to you want to persevere. You want to have tenacity, and you want to understand that that's what it takes, right? Because it is about change management and transformation.
I could not agree more. And this has been such an enlightening and enjoyable conversation. So I want to thank you both for taking the time.
Thank you.
I want to congratulate you on your third reunion coming together. That's very exciting. And audience, we are about to head over to South Africa to be joined by Craig Stewart for a brilliant episode of Data Conversations Over Coffee, where he'll be joined by Maloko Komain, Group Executive Head, Business Advisory Africa Multi-Choice Group.